Michael had always believed that marriage would bring a new kind of peace to his life. He imagined warm mornings, quiet dinners, shared laughter, and long talks with his wife, Alina. They were a young couple, still learning how to build a home together. But what he did not expect was how strongly another presence would influence the early days of his marriage. His mother-in-law, Lena. From the very first moment he met her, something about her stood out. Not in a dramatic way, not in a way that crossed lines, but in a way that made her unforgettable. She carried herself with a gentle confidence, a kind of honest warmth that made people feel seen. She did not hide behind polite smiles or rehearsed greetings. She spoke with her eyes as much as with her words. And when she looked at Michael, he always felt as if she understood things he did not say aloud. The first family dinner happened only a week after the wedding. Michael and Alina drove to Lena's house, a quiet and spacious home on the edge of the town. The moment they stepped inside, Michael noticed the scent of fresh flowers and old wood, the kind of scent that carried memories in it. Lena welcomed them with soft excitement, pulling Alina into a hug, and then turning to Michael with a smile that reached her eyes. "You're family now," she said warmly. "So don't be shy here." Michael smiled back, a little surprised by the sincerity in her tone. Most people took time to warm up to him, but Lena spoke as if she had known him for years. Throughout dinner, she watched him not in a bold or uncomfortable way, but with an attentive gentleness. She asked about his work, his hobbies, his family, and his dreams, and she listened carefully. Every time he answered, she nodded slowly, as if she was trying to understand him deeply. Michael appreciated it. He wasn't used to being listened to with that level of sincerity, but he also felt something else, something he couldn't quite name. A feeling that made him sit up a little straighter, choose his words more carefully, and avoid letting his eyes meet hers for too long. After dinner, Alina received a phone call from her office. With an apologetic sigh, she stepped out onto the balcony. Michael remained in the dining room with Lena. The silence between them wasn't awkward, but it was full. She watched him quietly, her eyes soft and thoughtful. "You're adjusting well to married life?" she asked. Michael nodded. "We're still learning. It's new. New doesn't scare you," Lena said gently. "You have the kind of heart that tries, even when things feel uncertain." Her words were unexpected. They felt almost too accurate, too personal. Michael didn't know how she could read him so easily. Before he could respond, she continued, "You remind me of someone I knew long ago. Someone who carried the weight of his world without ever complaining." Michael felt a strange warmth at her words, something between appreciation and confusion. "I just try to do what's right," he said quietly. "I know," she answered. "It shows." Before he could say anything else, Alina's voice echoed from the balcony, calling his name. The moment broke and Lena stepped back, giving him a polite smile. As they left later that evening, Michael found himself thinking about the conversation far more than he expected. He wasn't sure why her words stayed with him. He wasn't sure why her gaze felt so understanding. But the feeling lingered long after they drove away from the house. Over the next few weeks, Michael met Lena a few more times. Every time, he noticed something new about her. A calmness in the way she moved, a softness in her voice, a quiet sadness that touched the corners of her smile. She had lost her husband years ago. Something Alina had told him lightly, as though trying not to open an old wound. Lena never talked about it, and she never showed pity toward herself. But there was a depth in her eyes, the kind that only comes from surviving something heavy. Michael respected that strength. He admired it even, and perhaps that admiration made him more aware of her than he should have been. One evening, Michael and Alina visited again for dinner. This time, Alina seemed distracted, checking her messages often and stepping away to take short phone calls. Michael stayed at the table with Lena, trying not to appear frustrated. But she noticed. "You seem tired," she said quietly, pouring him a glass of water. "It's nothing," he replied quickly. "Just work." "You're lying," she said with a small smile. "Not intentionally." "But you are." Michael looked at her, surprised. "How do you know?" "Your eyes," she said simply. "They say more than you think." Before he could respond, Alina returned to the room, smiling apologetically and sitting beside him. The moment passed again, but Michael couldn't shake the feeling that his mother-in-law saw him more clearly than even his wife did. After dinner, Alina complained about a deadline she had to meet at work, and she asked Michael if they could leave early. Lena didn't mind. She kissed her daughter's forehead, hugged her gently, and then looked at Michael with that same unreadable softness. "Take care of yourself," she said. It sounded like a simple goodbye, but for some reason, it felt deeper. As they drove home, Michael remained unusually quiet. He stared out of the window, thinking about small things. Her voice. Her understanding. He didn't know why these thoughts filled his mind, but they did. He tried to focus on Alina, on their home, their plans, their young marriage. But something about Lena seemed to pull at him in ways he couldn't explain. A few days later, Alina asked him if he wanted to visit her mother again over the weekend. She spoke casually, without noticing the hesitation in Michael's silence. He nodded eventually, because there was no reason to refuse. But something inside him tightened. It wasn't because he feared anything inappropriate. Lena had never crossed a boundary, not even close. She had never flirted, never behaved in a way that lacked respect. Everything she did was warm, thoughtful, and perfectly proper. But intention wasn't the issue. It was the quiet emotional connection he felt growing without permission. He didn't fully understand it yet. He didn't know whether it was admiration, comfort, curiosity, or just the effect of her kindness. But he knew one thing: he felt something whenever he was around her. Something he wasn't supposed to feel. And as the weekend approached, a strange anticipation built in his chest. He didn't want to admit it, but he knew the truth. His mother-in-law wasn't shy with him, and that simple truth was beginning to change everything in ways he didn't expect. The weeks after that first dinner with Lena passed in a strange blur for Michael. On the outside, his life seemed normal. He went to work, came home, and spent time with Alina. Yet inside, a storm of emotions was brewing that he didn't fully understand. Alina was consumed with her job, often stressed and irritable, and small arguments started to appear where there had never been any before. Michael found himself increasingly distracted, not by the problems themselves, but by the emotional gap he felt when Alina wasn't fully present. It was in that space that Lena's presence began to weigh more heavily on his mind. She had a way of noticing things that no one else did. She could see when he was tired, when he was sad, and when he tried to hide the weight on his shoulders. She didn't comment judgmentally. She only observed, gently, carefully, as if she were cataloguing his heart without asking for anything in return. One rainy afternoon, a phone call from Lena interrupted his usual evening routine. She asked if he could come by her house to help fix a window that had been damaged in the storm. Michael hesitated, aware that it wasn't a necessity, but the way she spoke, calm and polite yet with a touch of quiet concern, made him agree. When he arrived at her house, the air smelled faintly of rain and tea. Lena greeted him at the door with a soft smile, her hair loosely tied and damp from the drizzle outside. She looked tired, yet something about her presence seemed alive, as if her very being had the power to soothe the chaos in his mind. "Thank you for coming," she said simply. I didn't want to ask anyone else, but I knew you could help. Michael followed her to the broken window. As he worked, she stayed nearby, not hovering but present. She moved with quiet grace around the room, setting a small tray with water and snacks on the table, always aware of his comfort. It was not flirtation. It was attention. And yet, attention has a way of breaking through walls. You seem heavy today, Lena said suddenly, her voice soft, measured. Michael paused, a screwdriver in his hand. He didn't know what to say. She wasn't asking casually. She was stating something that felt like truth. Just things with Alina, he admitted quietly. She nodded, leaning against the wall nearby. Her gaze was steady but gentle, not invasive. I can see it. You're carrying more than you should alone. He didn't expect her words to resonate so strongly. Her voice wasn't the kind that dramatizes or exaggerates feelings. It simply acknowledged them, like a mirror reflecting his own emotions back to him. Michael finished fixing the window and prepared to leave, thinking the moment had passed, but Lena stopped him. Michael, she said, stepping closer, though not too close, her voice soft. You don't need to carry this weight by yourself. Everyone deserves someone who understands them. Don't forget that. He looked into her eyes, and for a brief moment, time seemed suspended. There was warmth there, an unspoken empathy, and it made his chest tighten. He felt seen, truly seen, in a way that was rare and almost painful. Thank you, he whispered. I don't know why this feels so different. It's okay, she replied. It's normal to feel relief when someone notices what you can't say. Her words echoed inside him long after he left the house. That night, Michael found himself thinking of her again and again, not in a way that crossed boundaries, but in a way that made him question how deeply a human connection could affect a person. He felt guilt, too, because he was drawn to someone he shouldn't be drawn to. She was his mother-in-law, a figure in his life he should respect, admire, and keep at a proper distance. But her honesty, her warmth, her careful attention, it stirred feelings. He didn't know how to name. The days passed in a mix of normal life and quiet tension. Every time he returned to Lena's house for a visit, every time she greeted him with a small, knowing smile, a quiet storm of emotion would rise inside him. He started to notice small gestures he hadn't before, the way she tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, the way her hand lingered on the doorknob when she spoke, the subtle intensity in her eyes that seemed to study him without judgment. One afternoon, he arrived unannounced, needing a brief break from Alina's constant work chatter. Lena answered the door, surprised but welcoming. She invited him in with a calm, quiet ease, the kind of ease that made someone feel instantly safe. They moved to the living room, where the rain tapped gently against the windows. Michael felt the tension of the week slipping away. Though he could not fully understand why being here with Lena felt so different than anywhere else. They talked about trivial things at first. The weather, the repairs she needed, her garden plans. But slowly the conversation became deeper, more personal. Lena listened to him speak about work, about life, about the little disappointments and frustrations he tried to hide from Alina. Every word was met with thoughtful nods, quiet encouragements, and soft questions that nudged him to open further. You've been carrying too much, she said finally, after a long pause. You deserve comfort, not just responsibility. Michael swallowed. He hadn't realized he needed to hear that. I try, he said, his voice low. I try to be the husband Alina needs, the son-in-law she expects. And you are, Lena replied gently. That sometimes being what everyone expects doesn't leave room for being who you really are. Her words touched him more than he expected. There was a depth to her understanding that went beyond casual conversation. He had always believed that no one could fully see him, not even Alina at times. Yet here was someone who recognized his struggle, not with pity, but with empathy. For a long moment, they sat in silence. Michael was aware of his own heartbeat, of the strange mixture of guilt, longing, and relief swirling inside him. He knew he was feeling something he shouldn't, yet he also recognized the pure humanity in their connection. There was no crossing of boundaries, no inappropriate behavior, only recognition, understanding, and the quiet building of a bond that felt unspoken, almost forbidden in its subtlety. Before the moment could grow heavier, Michael realized he had stayed longer than he intended. He stood, gathering his things. Lena walked him to the door, her expression unreadable but soft. "Remember," she said quietly, "you don't have to carry everything alone. Even if no one else sees it, I do." Her words followed him as he stepped into the rain, cool drops soaking his jacket. He didn't look back, but the warmth of her gaze lingered, etched into his mind. He felt both guilty and grateful, aware that something had shifted within him. The connection he felt toward Lena was complicated, layered, and entirely emotional, yet powerful enough to make him question his own heart. That night, at home, Michael struggled with his thoughts. Alina was busy working late, and he sat alone in their living room, remembering every detail of his visit. The sound of her voice, the look in her eyes, the calm assurance she carried without trying. He realized that what he felt was not romance in the physical sense, but a deep emotional resonance. Lena had touched a part of him that had been dormant. A longing for understanding, for acceptance, for someone who could see the real him. And with that realization came another truth he couldn't ignore. He had to navigate these feelings carefully. He loved Alina, and he respected Lena, and he understood the boundaries of their relationships. Yet he also could not deny the impact Lena had on him. She was a quiet force, gentle but undeniable, and the way she could make him feel truly seen had begun to change his inner world. As the rain continued outside, Michael understood that the weeks ahead would test him emotionally. He needed to reconcile his loyalty, his love, and his sense of duty with the unexpected feelings Lena had awakened. It was a delicate balance, and he knew that one misstep could cause pain. But at the same time, he could not erase the warmth that her presence left in his heart. For Michael, the simple truth became undeniable. Lena was no longer just a mother-in-law. She had become a mirror, a confidant, a source of quiet understanding. And though he knew he must tread carefully, he also realized that this emotional connection, innocent and profound, would continue to shape his life in ways he had never anticipated. The storm outside faded, leaving only the memory of her words and her gaze. Michael knew that he had glimpsed a world of emotional honesty he had never experienced before. It was both beautiful and dangerous, and it would follow him quietly into every encounter, every conversation, every visit that lay ahead. And that was how Michael discovered that some feelings, even when pure and respectful, could exist in places he never expected, and with people he never imagined would touch his heart so deeply. Days passed after that rainy afternoon at Lena's house, and Michael could not shake the memory of her calm voice, her warm gaze, and the way she seemed to understand him without words. He tried to focus on Alina, on their life together, but something had changed inside him. He felt a quiet pull toward Lena, not in a physical sense, but in the way her presence made him feel alive, noticed, and emotionally lighter than he had felt in months. One evening, after a long day filled with small arguments and misunderstandings with Alina, Michael stepped out of their apartment without realizing where he was going. His mind felt restless, and without planning it, he found himself walking toward Lena's street. The houses were quiet, the streetlights casting gentle halos in the dark. His steps slowed as he approached Lena's home, a strange combination of hesitation and relief filling him. When Lena opened the door, she seemed unsurprised. There was no awkward pause, no question of why he was there. Instead, she smiled softly, as if she had known he would come. "You look tired," she said, her voice calm and steady. "I needed someone to talk to," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. She nodded, stepping aside to let him in. The house smelled faintly of jasmine and warm tea, familiar and comforting. They moved to the living room, sitting on opposite ends of a soft couch. Rain had begun again, tapping against the windows, filling the room with a quiet rhythm that made the moment feel suspended in time. Neither of them spoke for a few minutes. Michael stared at the floor, thinking about how strange it was that he had come here, drawn by an emotional need he could not name. Lena watched him with a gentle attentiveness, as though she were waiting for him to speak at his own pace, without judgment. Finally, Michael broke the silence. "I don't know why I feel like I can talk to you," he confessed. "I shouldn't. I love Alina. I respect you. But being here, it feels different." Lena didn't move or speak immediately. She simply let him finish, her eyes soft and patient. Then she said quietly, "I understand. You feel something you're not supposed to, and yet it exists. You don't need to explain it to me. I see it and I respect it." Her words surprised him. She didn't chastise him. She didn't scold him. She simply acknowledged the emotional truth. That honesty hit him harder than he expected. He felt a strange combination of relief and fear. Relief, because he had found someone who could understand him. Fear, because he knew how fragile this connection was, and how easily it could be misunderstood. He looked up at her and saw a flicker of vulnerability in her eyes, something he had never noticed before. Lena had always seemed composed, calm, almost untouchable in her grace. But now, for a brief moment, he saw that she too carried weight, too had her own moments of longing and quiet sadness. It made her more human, more relatable, and somehow more magnetic. "I don't want to feel like this," Michael admitted, his voice breaking slightly. "I shouldn't feel drawn to you. You're Alina's mother. I shouldn't." "You don't need to apologize," Lena interrupted softly. "Feelings aren't wrong. Actions are. Thoughts are not sins. You only need to navigate them carefully." He nodded, swallowing hard. Her words were soothing, but they also forced him to confront the truth. His heart had begun to respond to her in ways he could not fully control. It was emotional, not physical, but the intensity of it made his pulse quicken and his mind whirl. For a while, they simply sat together. Michael spoke little, but his thoughts raced. He realized that Lena had become a safe harbor for him, a place where he could lay down the armor he wore around everyone else. With her, he could be honest, vulnerable, and human. And it terrified him that this connection might grow beyond what was appropriate. Then Lena spoke again. "Michael, I've watched you. I've seen how you struggle with your own feelings, your own responsibilities. I never want to interfere with your marriage. But I also want you to know that you don't have to carry everything alone. Even if you can't share it with anyone else, you can be honest with yourself." Her words were like a gentle current pulling him closer, not physically, but emotionally. He felt a warmth spread through his chest, a mixture of gratitude, longing, and quiet fear. He realized he had been craving understanding, a safe space, a person who could see his heart without judgment. And Lena had become that person. He reached out tentatively and touched her hand, not in a romantic gesture, but in a human one, a gesture of gratitude and connection. Lena didn't pull away. She held his hand for a brief moment, her touch gentle, reassuring, and full of unspoken understanding. It was enough to make him tremble slightly, aware of the depth of his own emotions and the delicacy of the moment.
Thank you,
he whispered.
for seeing me.
You're welcome, Lena replied softly. Sometimes, being seen is all we need. The silence returned, but it was comfortable now. The room was filled with unspoken words, with emotional honesty, with feelings that could not be acted on, but could not be ignored either. Michael realized that this moment, this connection, was a turning point. Lena had shown him that human emotion could exist in its purest form: care, empathy, understanding without crossing boundaries, without needing to be physical. But even as he acknowledged this, reality intruded. His phone rang, piercing the quiet. It was Alina. He looked at Lena, feeling a pang of guilt. She gave him a small, understanding smile, as if she had known this moment would end eventually. Go, she said softly. Your story with her isn't finished yet. Don't forget that your life, your marriage, matters too. Michael nodded, stepping outside into the cool night air. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets glistening under the soft glow of the streetlights. He walked home slowly, thinking about everything that had just happened. He realized that he had glimpsed something rare, a connection that was deeply emotional, profoundly human, and entirely innocent, yet powerful enough to leave a permanent mark on his heart. Over the next few days, Michael tried to reconcile his feelings. He loved Alina, and he was committed to his marriage. Yet the memories of Lena's calm presence, her understanding words, and the quiet comfort she offered kept returning to him. He understood that what he felt was not something he could act upon, nor should he, but it had changed him. He was more aware of his own emotions, more reflective about his relationships, and more attuned to the needs of others. Lena, too, seemed aware of the subtle tension. She never overstepped, never pushed boundaries, and never suggested anything improper. She simply offered her quiet understanding, her empathy, and her emotional support when needed. It was a lesson in how to care for someone without crossing lines, in how to show kindness and depth without taking advantage. One evening, Michael returned to Lena's house, this time just to bring some fresh flowers she liked. They sat together for a short while, talking